Hello everyone. I am outside without a coat on, which is very exciting, and our forecast is looking really good as well. So today I am going to enjoy the weather and go through the questions that I had you guys submit about spring gardening, because we are already into what I feel like is the beginning of the busiest part of the season. I already feel like I am behind, so I'm hoping that some of the answers will be helpful. Also, just wanted to point out, if you can see behind me, I have taken my greenhouse covers off of my tulips. One, because they are starting to form their flowers and I want to be able to actually see the flowers. And two, we don't have rain in the forecast. So I think most of them are already at the point where they're tall enough that I don't think they would rot without flowering, but this is really exciting. So let's go ahead and start with the questions. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is the question around when to move your plants outside. Now, this is going to vary a lot depending on your location, but also if we're in the same zone, it can also still vary by location. So I'm on a rooftop deck, which heats up faster than at the ground level, and I'm in a more urban area, which tends to be hotter. So even though there is such a thing as your last frost date, that is just the average over the last few years. It doesn't mean that your last frost date is going to be that exact date this year. And again, there are so many factors. So when you're trying to figure out when to move your plants outside, I would just rely on your weather forecast. Now, here in Chicago, on my garden, I already have all of my cool season crops outside, and they've been outside for at least 3 weeks now, if not a month. So those crops can handle temperatures dipping below 32 degrees. But your warm season crops cannot. So you don't want to put them outside at the same time as your cool season crops. But also, I don't just rely on temperatures staying above 32, because a lot of your warm season crops, maybe they won't die, but they will be damaged or stunted. So here is what I do when I'm deciding what to move outside. And this is especially helpful if you are just getting started with gardening. Let's say I have a certain type of plant. We'll go with a tomato plant. I will go to the internet and search for tomato plant minimum temperature. So if we do that right here, tomato plant minimum temperature, you might get a few different results depending on the article you're reading, but here it says they generally thrive in temperatures between 55 and 85 degrees. There's another one that says temperatures should be between 58 and 60. So that doesn't mean that 55 they'll die. It just means that's the range where they're going to thrive. So you could put them out before that, but I want to make sure my plants don't die, at least not right at the beginning. So I will just check my weather forecast, and once our nights are consistently above 50 degrees, I will plant my tomatoes out. Now again, just because tomatoes can go outside doesn't necessarily mean all of your plants can. Usually around that time, that 50-degree minimum is going to be safe for most of your warm season crops, flowers, vegetables, fruit. But there are some that like a little bit more heat. So for example, if I type in pepper plant minimum temperature, these like nighttime temperatures between 60 and 70 degrees. And it actually says that temperatures below 50 can cause some cold stress to the plant. So peppers, basil, I think those are the only two really heat-loving plants that I grow that I move out later than everything else. So let's say I move out most of my warm season plants mid-May. I probably won't move those outside until late May just to be safe. So that's what I recommend doing. Search for the minimum ideal temperature for whatever plant you're growing. Again, usually 50 degrees or above at night will be good. And then move your plant outside when the weather forecast shows that the nighttime temps are going to be within that range. A day or two where it dips down below into the 40s should be fine, but that's much better to do than just sticking to a certain date, because the weather is different every year. Now, if you happen to move your plants out too early and a cold snap comes through, which it did one year for my peppers at the end of May, the good thing about container gardening is that if your containers are lightweight enough, you can move them inside. And I have done that. I have brought, I think, my peppers and my dahlias back inside when we had an unexpected cold snap. So you can do that. That's perfectly fine. I also sometimes plant things in containers I can't bring inside. So, well, they do have frost-free blankets that you can toss onto your plants. I don't have specific blankets for the garden, so I literally took some of my thicker blankets and draped them over the support cage to protect my peppers that I couldn't bring inside. And it worked out really well. So there might be times after you move out your plants, they'll either want to bring them back inside or cover them, again, with any unexpected drops in temperature. But for the most part, I usually don't have to do that every year. I'm a person that will wait a little bit later to make sure I can keep my plants outside than getting them out at the first sign of warmer temperatures. So obviously I will show you as I move my plants outside, but again, make sure the weather is appropriate in your location before moving them out. Next, a similar question, when do you put your dahlias outside in grow bags, which I can also bring inside if it gets too cold? I am going to grow my tubers in grow bags this year and try to store them in my garage over winter. I'm in zone 7B and I don't want to put them out too early, but I also don't want them to dry up waiting. So first of all, if they're already sprouting, you can water them inside. I have watered the dahlias, which are still inside my house that I planted this spring. My other dahlias are still in the garage. I'm going to leave them there until it warms up enough and they sprout. But once I see the sprout come through, I will go ahead and water them. So you don't have to wait until they're outside. Now, obviously you don't want water to go everywhere, so you want to make sure they're underneath the saucer, in a shower, in a bathtub, but I definitely water all of my warm season plants multiple times while they are still inside. Now with that, let's do the same thing that I did for tomatoes and peppers. So we will say dahlia, minimum temperature. So the minimum temperature they can tolerate before they start to show signs of stress or damage is around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Prolonged temperatures below 50 degrees can lead to blackening of leaves and stems. So these are ones that I will also move out a little bit later. One, because I have so many and don't want to have to bring all of them back inside. And two, because I do feel like they are a little bit more cold sensitive than some of my other flowers, like my gomphrena, my zinnias. I won't feel like I need to move those in if a few nights drop down into the 40s. My dahlias I am a little bit more protective over, so I will usually put those out either right before I put out my peppers or around that same time. Now, if your dahlias have been indoors and they are sprouting, you do want to harden them off just like you would with any of your seedlings. So I wouldn't just take my dahlias and put them outside in 70-degree weather in full sun. I will bring them out into a shaded area one day, maybe for an hour, bring them back in. Bring them out, maybe give them a little bit more sun, leave them out for a little bit longer, bring them back in. And I will do that process before I leave them out completely. So if we're at a point in the season where, let's say it is 50 degrees during the day, but it does drop down into the 40s pretty regularly, I will start hardening them off then by just bringing my dahlias out during the daytime, bring them back in overnight, and then eventually when it warms up enough after hardening them off, I will keep them out. So I'm looking for consistent temperatures in our forecast at least 50 degrees, but I am hardening them off before that. So for me, again, that's usually between mid to late May, but it does vary year over year. And since you are in zone 7B and I am 6A, you will probably be able to move yours out sooner. Now, if your plants are still small, or maybe they're just either they haven't popped through the soil yet, or they are just barely breaking through the soil, you don't really have to worry about hardening them off, so I would just move them outside. But that is what you want to look for, that 50-degree low temperature, especially in grow bags, because the tubers themselves aren't really going to have any extra insulation from a dip in the weather. So you do want to be extra careful with any of your plants that are in grow bags. Next question. Do you pre-sprout your spring planted bulbs indoors while it's still too cold outside? Yes. If so, how early do you plant them indoors? When can we transplant them outside? Do we harden them off? Yes, like with veggie seedlings, and wait until after last frost. Thanks for your help. So again, this is going to vary based on the type of plant that you're starting inside. Look for that plant's minimum temperature. But yes, I like to start as much as I can inside because we don't have a super short growing season in Chicago, but we also don't have a super long growing season. So I want to give as many of my plants as I can a head start. I have all my dahlias inside right now. I don't really have any other bulb or tuber plants that I start, at least that I can remember. Everything else I think is from seed. But yes, anything that I can start inside early, I will. I know these are more cold tolerant, but I even just grew some tulips inside because I wanted to see them grow. So yes, you can definitely do that, and that will give them a little bit more of a head start once they get out into your garden. Like I said, you do want to harden them off just like you would with any of your other seedlings, so just move them out with all the rest of the plants, making sure that they increase their tolerance and they aren't going to burn as soon as you give them full sun. How early do I plant them indoors, or how early should I plant them indoors? My dahlias, I think, are going to be a little bit larger than I would hope because I get bored and antsy in the early spring and just want to get things planted. But I would say if you don't want to have too large of plants, maybe like 4 weeks before. But again, if you have something that takes a really long time to sprout, I think I had caladiums a few years ago and they took much longer to sprout and grow than my dahlias. You'll want to start them a bit sooner. But I would say probably make sure they're still relatively small, unless you don't mind taking care of a bunch of taller plants. But I just know that I tend to start things too early and then potentially regret it a little bit and be very, very eager to kick them out. Next, I really like this question because I've been there. At what point do I give up on seeds and just buy seedlings? This is my first year trying flowers and I failed miserably. I had like 90% germination, but then they all struggled to grow. First of all, if you want to send any other extra info, I would love to help you figure out if it was something with lighting, fertilizing, some sort of fungal issue, just so we can figure out how to hopefully increase that rate next year to make sure your plants live. But oh my gosh. So right now I even have some plants where none of the varieties have germinated. So once I try, so let's say I plant my first seeds. If most of them make it and a couple varieties don't, if I can find those varieties in store, I'll just buy them in store. If not, maybe I will try planting some seeds again, so a second round of the same seeds either inside or direct sowing some of them outside and just see if they grow. But since most of yours, what did it say? They all struggled to grow. I would say go get your favorite plants from the garden center that you can. Maybe direct sow some seeds and see what happens, but I wouldn't just rely on direct sowing all of your seeds. And I don't think it's ever bad to go to the garden center to buy your plants. Yes, it might be more expensive. Like if I'm growing, which I think I am, 40 zinnias here at home, if not even more than that, it's less expensive to start from seed than to go to the garden center. But if you have to go to the garden center, that's fine. There are also a bunch of plants I just get from the garden center anyway. My herbs, because I don't grow that many of them, I usually have 1 or 2. I like to get some of my vegetable plants from there. My peppers I will get from the garden center. So yeah, first of all, I like to feel like any failures are just things that I've learned for next year to figure out for gardening. And I never feel bad about just going and getting plants from the store. Oh, also in the past when my tulips have rotted, I will just go to the garden center and get their pre-sprouted tulips and stick them in my beds so that I at least have something to look at. Next question, are there any fruit trees that can be successfully grown in Chicago Zone 6A? Definitely. So a few different things. If you are growing in the ground, you want to make sure that the zone minimum is 6 or lower. If you are growing in containers and you're planning to leave your fruit trees out over the winter, you really want to go at least zone 4, if not lower. And there are fruit trees that fit that category as well. Fewer than in zone 6, but it is still possible. So here is what I'm currently growing. I have 2 columnar apple trees. Apple trees do really well. I have 1 miniature peach tree, and then I have a Chicago hardy fig, which was named that because it can live in Chicago. So those are what I have. I don't know if I'm going to get any more fruit trees. My raspberry bushes, those do well every year just being left outside. But I'm just going to go to the Stark Bros website. That's where I get most of my fruit trees from. Why? I don't know. That's where I got them at first, and I just keep doing what I like. So you can go to shop by category, fruit trees, and basically any other site that you go to will have some sort of way to filter for the type of plant you're looking for and layer on your zone. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to pick plants that are hardy down to zones 6, 5, or 4. Let's see if they have, oh, they do have 3, and they do have 2. So what is in here are 189 items. So Asian pear, peach trees, nectarine, let's see, I mean, there's a ton in here. Another black fig, a sweet cherry. When I was growing up, we had apple and pear trees in the yard, and I grew up like an hour away, same zone. And then we had cherry trees in our next door neighbor's house. So yes, if you're looking for planting them in the ground, 100%. I mean, Stark Bros has 189 items. Let's say you're like me and want to grow them in containers and keep them outside. If I was going to say my fig, I'm a little bit nervous about, but I can't. It's going to be planted in a pot that's too large to move inside. So my goal really is to be able to keep every single thing outside. So here I have taken out zones 6 and 5. We're just looking at 4, 3, and 2, and they have 87 items. So there is still a good amount. So let's say they have a lot of apples listed, peaches. Oh, I want to call out one thing. I don't think all sites do this, but this one does, because I saw a lemon tree here one time and I was like, that doesn't seem right. So let's open up the olive tree here. If you look at zones, it says it is hardy from zones 2 to 9, but there's an asterisk. So that asterisk, if you scroll down to where there's a bit more information, it says outdoor planting, it's hardy from 7 to 9. But if you bring it in, you can do 2 through 9, which obviously, if I can bring my plant inside and keep it warm enough, you can grow anything. But make sure when you're going through lists like this, and again, I don't know if other websites really do this, make sure that you're looking at the outdoor planting and that it can stay outdoors in whatever zone you are looking for. Also, if you just go to your local garden center, they should, for the most part, only be selling plants that can survive in your zone. Now, sometimes garden centers will sell olive trees, lemon trees. I know that ours do around here, and you're meant to bring those inside. Typically, those are in their greenhouses, but anything that's sitting outside should be able to survive in the location where you are living. Double check the plant tags, double check with people that are working there. If you're planting in ground, those should be able to withstand the cold temperatures. However, again, with containers, make sure you're looking for something 2 zones colder than what they have at the garden centers. Next question, what's the best type of water to use if you are unable to have a rain barrel? Can you use tap water and let it sit for 24 hours? So first off, I don't have a rain barrel. I think in Chicago you can. Our gutters go directly into the ground, and I don't want to mess with wherever they're deciding to direct the water. So I don't have a rain barrel. I use whatever comes out of the spigot in my hose and water my plants, and I don't let anything sit for 24 hours. I know that's a recommendation I've seen, especially with house plants, but I just go to the sink and also fill up my pitcher and water my house plants immediately. So I haven't had any issues. Again, I am using water in the city of Chicago, so it might be a little bit difference on the quality of water based on where you're living. I'm not a water quality expert, but for the most part, I don't think I know any gardeners that either just water with rainwater or let water sit out. I'm pretty sure most people will just take it right from the faucet. I will say though, because I don't have rain barrels, if I know it's going to be a rainy day, I'll just leave buckets out. In fact, let me grab a bucket real quick. This is one of the buckets that I will leave out, and I will either use this to water my plants or I will use the water in my composter, just depending on what I want. It's not going to be as efficient as a barrel because it's not directing all of the water in here through a gutter, but I can get a good amount of water on very rainy days. So yeah, if you don't have a rain barrel, you can definitely leave out other types of containers. But again, I wouldn't worry about just having to water with rainwater. Next question, I was curious about your potting mix. I've heard great things about Happy Frog soil and products. This will be the first year I'm trying. Have you had any experience with these? I have not, but I feel like I've heard of that brand name. So I'm gonna look that up really quick. Happy Frog potting soil. I mostly use whatever is available at the garden center. I mean, I have everything from potting mix that garden centers make themselves to getting Miracle-Gro at Home Depot. And as long as I don't find any really weird things in the soil, like I have found plant tags, I have found twist ties, I have found glass, those bags I would recommend not using. But if you don't find anything weird and the potting mix texture feels good, I would use that. So I have so many different brands of potting mix in my beds. I don't ever switch out all my beds. I just add compost and perlite every year, which I will do soon. So I don't even really know what exactly is in all of my beds anymore. But I tend not to worry too much about getting like the best quality. Again, as long as it looks okay when I take it out of the bag, and I can always add compost or fertilizer. But the nutrients that come in the potting mix can get used up by your plants pretty quickly. So most of the time I'm just adding the nutrients myself anyway. So the growing medium, again, as long as it looks healthy and normal and there is no glass in it, I would recommend using. But I just looked it up and I have seen this brand before. Are they related to Fox Farm or is it, oh, they are related to Fox Farm. Okay, I was gonna say the designs look very similar. So I use the Fox Farm liquid fertilizer. And I've been using that ever since I started gardening. Again, if something's not broken, I don't try to fix it. I really like their fertilizers. So I would say it'll probably be good, at least from my experience with their fertilizers. But yeah, as soon as I saw that design, I was like, I'm pretty sure that is Fox Farm. But let me know how it goes for you. I know that I'll link these videos down below. I know that Epic Gardening has done a lot of potting mix comparisons, if that helps. But again, I don't worry too much about it. I just know that I'm going to be amending the potting mix in my beds, in my containers throughout the season. So that is all of the questions. If you do have any more, let me know down below and I will answer you there. If you have any experience or do something differently than the way that I do them, let me know down below too, because again, I like to try to give as much helpful information as I can, but every garden is so different that sometimes what applies to mine might not apply to yours. So if you do have any other experience with any of the questions, leave those down below as well. And I will see you in the next video where I'm hoping it's just as nice, although maybe I might be inside starting more seeds. We'll see. Bye.